Thanks everyone for showing up, and I really appreciate it, Zach and Alec. I figure I just want the students to be able to ask you questions, but I thought maybe you could just introduce yourselves, Zach and Alec. Tell them a little bit about how you got started at the U of A and what you're doing and your job out of college and what you're doing now. So Zach, do you want to start?
Sure. Yeah, so I'm from New Jersey. I'm back in New Jersey now. I wanted to get the heck out of New Jersey, which is why I wound up at Arizona, and now I'm back. But yeah, I went to U of A, went to the J school. I think I got some of my teeth. My sophomore year, I think I started working at the Daily Wildcat, and that's when I really started taking. I mean, I worked at the high school newspaper, so I knew that's what I wanted to do. But yeah, it wasn't until I started working at the Daily Wildcat that it really started taking off. Got an internship back in New Jersey at a newspaper back here, was able to cover stuff like Eagles practices and some local sports, and got some good experience with that. Then I started working part-time at the Daily Star while I was at the Daily Wildcat, covering stuff like the rodeo, which I'd never even heard of the rodeo before I got out to Arizona. That was an awesome experience, honestly, getting thrown into the fire. But yeah, covering a lot of U of A sports and high school sports. And then they hired me out of college at the Daily Star. That's where I met Alec eventually. He's a little younger than me though. Yeah, I worked at the Daily Star. Originally, I started out just covering like the secondary U of A sports like volleyball, softball. I mean, I shouldn't say secondary, but not like not like football or men's basketball. But so I started out with that stuff, and then eventually I became like the number 2 covering football with Michael Lev and basketball with Bruce Pascoe, and working with Greg Hansen and all those guys, and learned a lot from them. And then moved back east to NJ, covering the Sixers for NJ.com, then the Eagles, then the Giants, and then I got hired by the Athletic to cover the Jets, which I've been on since July. So I've moved around a lot in terms of job wise, but wound up where I always wanted to be. So yeah, that's kind of my journey.
That's excellent. Okay.
Yeah, I graduated from U of A in 2020. Just moved out here to Buffalo. I'm from Arizona. This is my first time living anywhere outside the state of Arizona. So Buffalo, New York, got here in July. Great weather in July. Now we're about to get hit with a lot of snow this weekend, so that'll be a fun test for me. But started freshman year at U of A as camp radio, getting involved with camp radio with Justin Spears, who's still at the Daily Star. He kind of helped me get started, and then worked my way to doing both UATV and Daily Wildcat by my sophomore year, and that just kind of took off from there. Eventually got an internship the summer going into my senior year with Bally Sports Arizona, and which was originally Fox Sports, and that kind of led into a full-time job with the Daily Star as a digital reporter. So using both, my radio experience for podcasting with the Star, some UATV on-camera experience with the Star, and then was the sports editor for the Daily Wildcat. So just kind of taking that knowledge and applying that to the print version of the Daily Star as well. So really just kind of hitting all platform areas for them, and started doing that the start of my senior year in addition to classes. And then COVID happened, so everything went online for both sports and school. So was doing that for a while still with the Star full time, thankfully. And then that just kind of led into 3 years of coverage with basketball and football and women's basketball. Women's basketball coverage especially took off. That was kind of the big thing over the last 2.5 years, was the rise of kind of Adia Barnes in that program. So being able to cover that and tell those stories for the Star was really fun. And then that led me out here to Buffalo in July as the content coordinator for the Bills, where I help manage the website and the app for the team, doing day-to-day coverage, writing. Eventually, as it gets closer to playoffs, I'll be on our live radio / TV show doing playoff scenario breakdowns for our daily show called One Bills Live, hosted by Chris Brown, and then Steve Tasker, who's a well-known former NFL player that does a lot of analyst stuff for us. So that'll be a cool opportunity. but yeah, really just kind of using a lot of multimedia skills that I learned in college and then applying them to my job out here.
Nice. Cool. All right, thank you. I'll just open it up. Who wants to ask the first question? And who it's toward, if you can do that.
I can go first. Obviously, both you guys kind of had experience with Daily Wildcat and other like student media organizations at the U of A. What would you say that those kind of outlets gave you experience-wise as opposed to like actual schooling? And how are you able to use that, I mean, to eventually get to where you guys are now?
I can go first. So I would say the J School is awesome for like teaching you, writing and like the rules of reporting and things like that. And there's a lot of great teachers, obviously. But I think working at the Daily Wildcat, getting out in the field, interviewing people, having a deadline, having responsibility like that really teaches you how to do the job. And I did it a little uniquely too. I tried to dip my hands in every piece of the pie. I worked on the copy desk. I worked in design. I covered sports. I was a sports editor. So I tried to just learn everything I could. And yeah, I just think there's nothing that teaches you better than experience and getting thrown into the fire and experiencing what it's like, when you have a deadline and when you're at a press conference and the pressure's on you to ask a good question and, everybody's eyes are on you and things like that. Like you don't experience that in a classroom, you experience that out in the world. And so between Daily Wildcat and the internship I had, like that's where I really learned about how to go up to somebody, how to cold call people to interview them for a story, the right way to write things. You learn what works, what doesn't, what people read, what they don't. And so I think you learn there's a lot to gain from J School, obviously, but I think there's even more you can gain from getting out in the world and reporting and having responsibilities in that way.
Yeah, to build off that, you get a lot of reps, like Zach said, but I think it was important for me to like see that people actually read my work or viewed it other than my professor. Like that's one thing, like you get an assignment from your professor and you work on it, you turn it in, maybe a classmate sees it, but that's only going to your professor. It's not linked to anywhere on social media. And even though Camp, UATV, Daily Wildcat, it's not your most high traffic sites, like there's still people that will view it, parents, maybe students, like people that you send the link to. Like it's still a tangible physical thing. And I think when like people are going to see that, it should in theory make you more incentivized to give a little bit more effort than maybe you would for a paper you're writing for class that's just seen by your professor.
And on to build on that too, like you meet people when you're out reporting, you meet other reporters from not even just students, you meet professional reporters from other newspapers, you strike up a conversation with them, maybe you have something in common. Even beyond that, you build, if this is what you want to do long term, if there's a guy you cover while you're at the Daily Wildcat, I've interacted with guys that I covered in my life and my job that I covered when they were at the University of Arizona, and those became like sources for me way down. Like you don't think that far ahead, but building relationships, that if you do it the right way, it comes back to help you down the line. And so that you learn that at the Daily Wildcat too.
Alec, I wanted to ask, what was your experience like at Valley Sports?
Was the question about my Valley sports experience?
Yeah.
Okay. Just a little echoey. It was great. So, I mean, I was there during the summer, so it's just D-backs coverage. And so I was the digital / social media intern. And so what that entailed was really learning what it means to actually run social media for a company, a broadcast company that does live production of sports teams. So whether it's the Suns or the Cardinals, you're kind of in those meetings learning the strategy of, it's more than just throwing tweets at the wall and seeing what sticks or what goes viral. It's nuanced stuff. And so I had a chance to learn that. And then also live tweet from the account myself. I was with another intern and we took turns during the summer for D-backs games about 2 or 3 times a week, we would be either at the game if it's home or in the office if it's a road game, and we're tasked with live tweeting highlights, gifs, sponsored stuff that we post that we are required to post because Valley is sponsored with people. So it was a lot of experience just learning what it actually means to run a branded sports account rather than just running your personal account where you can just tweet kind of whatever.
I've got another question. I guess this is just for more like, I guess, the seniors here, but what was the biggest kind of like society change or lifestyle change from being in college to then jumping right in like to the workforce, especially in like journalism and or reporting and whatnot? Just because I know that's a jump from 4 years at the U of A to being in the real world.
I can start with this one. I think the first thing, like sports, especially football, college football or NFL, like it's on the weekends. So, I'm not going to say you won't ever have free weekends ever, because, I have some weekends, Saturdays off during the NFL season, but, college football, like if you're going to cover U of A football for the Daily Wildcat, you're probably working Saturday, and if it's a late game, like you're probably working into Sunday morning too. So I think that's the biggest adjustment, is knowing like once you leave, your weekends aren't centered around what your friends are doing or things you can do. It won't be that way every weekend, but there's going to be a majority of weekends where you're based around where the team you're covering, or if you're working for a team, or if you're working for an outlet like Zach, like where the team is at, who they're playing. So I think that's kind of the biggest difference, is just understanding where to find free time that's different free time than what it was in college.
The biggest difference for me personally, as someone who was in particular like single and kind of living on my own when I graduated, I found that there was more time for me to just focus on grinding and making calls. And it's not like I wasn't going out or anything like that and having fun, but I found it when I didn't have to have class do it here. I mean, you have bills you have to pay, you're out on your own, you're dealing with all that crap. But I found that if you're someone that works hard, it clears more of your schedule to go and work hard. And I don't know, there's something about like time, like as you get older, you lose a lot of that time, especially as you build a family and as you have other responsibilities in your life. And so when you're young, I always found that coming out of college, you're not going out with your friends all the time like you did in college. You're not going to class every day. You don't have to wake up at 8 a.m. to go to class or whenever your classes start. You have time to grind and outwork everybody else. And that's kind of how I viewed it when I first graduated.
Zach, just a question about your time now at the Athletic. Like, how do you view that as different than any of your other places that you've worked?
It's hard to hear you. Did you
You
ask
hear
me
that?
that?
I think the question was, how's the Athletic a little bit different from other places that you've worked?
Oh, okay. That's a good question. How can I put this? Like the Athletic is like, I mean, I don't know how familiar all you guys are with the Athletic, but so for example, my last place, nj.com/the Star Ledger, we were writing about every single thing that happened all the time. We always had to be on alert. If I had situations where I would be out with my mom for Mother's Day, and if the Eagles signed somebody, I had to pull out my laptop and write about it. So it was a constant grind, a lot of work. Not that it's not a lot of work now, but writing a lot, doing a lot of different things. You're being asked to do a lot of different things. You're pulling in a lot of different directions. It feels like you're always under pressure to make sure you're on top of every single thing. You're stressing constantly. And so I would say that wasn't really great for my mental health. But the Athletic, they're way more focused on quality over quantity. I would say they would rather you spend more time on one story than a little bit of time on 3 stories. And so that's something that I've really enjoyed. And they value long form stories, stories where you dive into somebody's background, their life, the people they care about, how they got here. you know, why they want to be a football player, like things like that. I'm able to focus more on those kind of stories, which are the ones I like writing and pursuing. And so that's why I really enjoyed working at The Athletic so far.
Again, this can be for both of you. I know you guys are both in pretty good spots. Obviously, Zach at The Athletic and Alec with the Bills. But what what's next? Or like, is there an end goal for both you guys?
I've been asked that before, and I've told, like, pretty recently. It's funny. I used to have, like, you know, an end goal in sight kind of thing, but as I've gotten older, it's more for me just been about just grinding away and doing as good as I can right now. And as opportunities present themselves, that might be a step up, or when I take that. Like, I always view The Athletic as an end goal, but now that I'm here, I don't know if I'm going to be here for the rest of my life. Like, if another opportunity arose, I'm not saying I wouldn't take it, but like, I'm really focused. I focus more on right now, trying to really just, you know, crush this job as much as I can. And then if I do that, then the other opportunities will come.
Yeah, I'm kind of in the same boat as Zach. I mean, I just started here, don't have a timeline on how long I'm going to, be here or what's next. I just, enjoy the day-to-day grind of what I do now. And, if I do my job right now, do it, put in hard work, do it the right way, then, whenever I feel ready for that next step, those opportunities are going to be there because I put the time in doing my job the right way, now and focusing on that as opposed to trying to figure out what to do next.
Cool. Thank you, guys.
Yeah, actually, I have a question for Alec.
Yeah. Hey, Brian, why
Yeah.
don't you introduce yourself, Brian?
Okay, yeah, I just got here like 10 minutes ago. Yeah, my name's Brian Savage. So I've done like sports reporting for the Daily Wildcat, as well as one of the publications like here in town. So did some things with UATV. So just a little quick background on myself. So yeah, my question for Alec was like, what was that transition like, going from the Arizona Daily Star and then making that jump all the way to like Buffalo, New York? I'm not sure like what your familiarity was with the Buffalo Bills, but just kind of like, just what was that experience like when you first got that job?
Yeah, so I mean, it was kind of a right place, right time, for myself and the Bills organization, where I was in a spot where I wanted a new challenge in life, and then the Bills, as an organization, was coming out of a period like during COVID where the staff was kind of reduced, and so they opened up a new position like called content coordinator, and that's my position now. So it's a newly created spot. No one's had it in the organization before, so that was pretty cool. I just kind of got lucky applying to it. One second. Lucky applying to it. When it opened up in May, I think I applied and got the job in first week of July. But I didn't know a single person in Buffalo, New York when I accepted the job outside of, briefly meeting coworkers in my interview process. So it was a big transition, moved all the way across the country, essentially got here in Buffalo, and then 3 days later went to training camp. So I kind of got here and then immediately began work. But I mean, it's been great because there's a lot of people on our staff side that work in media and content, and there are a lot of them that are around my age, maybe a year below me or 2 years above me. Like, there's 10 of us between video, social media, and then app and website, which I'm a part of. So I think that made the transition a little bit easier, is just having a larger staff around me that I could, get to know, as opposed to maybe a place like the Daily Star where I'm only working with, one or two people, per day. Justin Spears, Michael Lev, Bruce Pascoe. Those were my coworkers, but I was really only hanging out with, maybe Justin on the side. So it's been cool to just meet new people through that transition.
Right, and like my other question for you as well, like I was just wondering, like, do you think it was beneficial to your like reporting as a sports reporter by reporting a team that perhaps you weren't as familiar with, or creating content for a team that you weren't as familiar with the Buffalo Bills, than say creating content for a team that you grew up loving. So like I think you alluded to the Arizona Diamondbacks, I believe. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, so I mean, I I don't think it really mattered. I think what the Bills looked for was my skill set, like the things that I was doing content wise with the Daily Star. Did that translate to what the Bills are going to be asking of me in my position? I think from their answer it was yes. So I wouldn't say like reporting on my favorite team or not reporting on my favorite team. You know, the Bills aren't my favorite team, but I've grown to appreciate them. Um, I think I don't think it really had an impact. Does that help?
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
I have a question for Zach. So for the Athletic, I know they have you focusing on more profile stories for Jets players. I was wondering if maybe they let you do anything else in regards to the Jets, because I know some people for the Athletic, like Bo Wolf, he likes to do power rankings, and I think he does some other stuff as well. Do they let you do other stuff?
Yeah, they just want creative quality stuff. So while like the profiles are like a big part of what I do, I do, for example, like when I cover a Jets game, I'll have a column that goes up after the game, after I go into the locker room and talk to people, and then a couple days later I'll have a story where I kind of break down everything that happened in that game, what it means going forward, and then throughout the week I'm working on the next profile and things like that. So I'm able to do a lot of like different things, not just profiles, a lot of deep dives. We do some fun stories. Like I had to predict a bunch of stuff that was going to happen for the second half of the season for the Jets. I did a story on a Jets fan who before the season flipped a coin for every game, and so far he's gotten it perfect, which is pretty crazy. Especially because of who they've beaten, like the Bills and stuff. But as Alec knows. But yeah, so yeah, they give you the free, if you have a good idea. I've never been told no to any story I've pitched that I can think of so far. So I do have some freedom. They just want quality, and they want stuff that like our subscribers are going to want to read, and stuff that's going to hit when people are Googling about the Jets, and looking the search traffic and the social media traffic and all that stuff, the things that people are going to want to read. So it's not only the profile stuff, though. I think those tend to be our most successful stories.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
I have a question for Alec. This is Chance. So like with your knowledge in like multimedia and like digital journalism, like how big was that for you coming up to like, did that separate yourself from like just being able to write a report, like be able to do like social media, video and all that stuff? That like was that a big part of your career? And like we see just like that's a big part for like journalists coming up.
I think it's, a big part of my career, but I think it's also like depending what you want to do. Like Zach's skill set, like he does it like for the Athletic, he does, a lot of writing, and podcasting too. He doesn't need to have like for his job, he doesn't need to understand how to tweet professionally from the Jets account or like
I definitely don't know how to tweet professionally. I'll say that. Yeah.
Or like be on TV, even if he might do like a TV segment if a local TV station, ask him to come on, but he doesn't need to be like the best TV reporter. Whereas I'm a little different where I'm not on TV, but I've had experience in that. So I'll be going on one of our TV shows later this year. But I think it's important because there's a lot of roles in multimedia that ask you to do multiple things. So they want you to understand how to write, how to podcast, as opposed to just being able to be a great writer. I think that helps separate me. Some people, like I've been turned down, from previous jobs that I've applied to because I didn't have a specific skill set or thing that I was a master at. Like some jobs want you to be great at one certain thing, but my role, I wouldn't say I'm like great at everything, but I have experience in a lot of different things that allows me to slowly get better at each thing that I do. So sorry to be long-winded, but I'll do a game recap for the Bills, like write kind of what happened, and then I'm also interviewing players in the locker room after the game, and then I'll help push stuff from our app. So writing like quick blurby things to send out tweet style, but it's in app form for the Bills app. So doing a lot of different things as opposed to maybe just only being able to write or only being able to be on TV. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah. Hey, could I jump in with a question about interviewing? Alec and Zach, could you give some tips to the students on how you interview athletes and maybe some?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
I mean, the first step is, if you have the ability to do this, like if it's not like a spur of the moment interview, researching as much as you possibly can, like digging to every corner of Google that you can, finding out something quirky or interesting about this person, something they like, something they've been through, something about their family. Like really just that I do a deep dive on people before I talk to them. And that's how I'm able to find out some things. And then when you have that, my best advice for interviews is that you want to make them as conversational as you can, especially if you're one-on-one. It's a little harder when you have other people in the mix, but when you're one-on-one, you want to have a conversation. You don't just want to come up to them and start asking questions. You want to, introduce yourself. If there's something you found when Googling them that's kind of funny, you bring that up first, and then that loosens them up, and then you're able to talk to them and have just like a normal conversation with somebody. And if you approach it as, I'm a reporter talking to interview subject, and they might not really give you the same. Some guys are good no matter what. Others are going to shut off and not really give you anything. So I think the key is always trying to make it conversational and just go in as prepared and as researched as you can when you talk to somebody. And one thing that I even still struggle with to this day is you want to hear everything they're saying to you, because sometimes you get caught, you're thinking about the next question, something that you need to get to, and you might miss a great answer they just gave you. And it's important to ask follow-ups to things like that if you can, because then you get more detail. And getting as much detail as you possibly can is what separates the best writers and reporters from the other ones. So it's a lot. There's a lot going on, and it's stressful when you're talking to somebody and you're thinking about all these different things and they're saying all these things. But if you go in well researched, then you should be pretty prepared. So that would be my advice.
Nice.
Yeah, mine doesn't differ too much. I think it's just understanding like they're human too, they're people too. Like even though they might be this superstar athlete, whether it's college or NFL, like they're still a human being. They have emotions, they have things that they want to talk about. And I'm sure Zach has learned this tactic too, but we have open locker room times. They don't do it as much in college now, but
Right.
there's going to be groups of media that herd to one player, and then there's going to be a whole section of the locker room or whole sections of players that don't get talked to. And sometimes some of the best stuff comes when you don't follow the herd and you go talk to the running back that maybe didn't have the best week, or that people aren't talking to, or even waiting after the herd. Like I've been in scrum, media scrums where all the cameras are there, and then everybody kind of leaves at the same time or the interview ends. But it's okay to like say, hey, I have a follow-up, or I want to know more about this. And sometimes you get that extra quote because players with the cameras in their faces, like some guys just kind of shut down if they have 10 different people in their face. But if you get them right after that moment, you might get a couple things here and there. So but for college athletes, I think it's just kind of relating to them. Like if you're covering whether it's volleyball, football, baseball, whatever sport on campus, is just kind of finding things to relate. Like Zach said, do a Google search, find something about their family, and lead with that before starting your interview.
Nice. That's great. Good advice.
Got one more question. Obviously, applying to jobs and interviewing for jobs for some can be kind of stressful, and they don't necessarily know like what to do. So I guess per se, like in your guys' experience, what would you say to kids applying to jobs and that eventually get interviews? Like any advice or any tidbits that you have found successful, especially in like the sports world?
There's nothing I've hated in my career more than the interview and the process of trying to find jobs. I'll say I've had many experiences, I'm sure Alec has too, where you even interview for a job, you think it goes great, and then you don't hear back from the place like ever again. Like that, I've had that many. Like, and when you mentally start preparing yourself for a new job, and then it just never comes, like that's very deflating. But my best advice would be, again, is number one, be yourself. Number two, talk about yourself and like that, hype up the things that you're really good at, without sounding like you're bragging kind of thing. But it is important to say everything you're good at. If you're confident about something that you're good at and you know that you'll be good at it for them, you talk about that. You say why you think you'll be a good fit on their staff. You know, read up on the stuff they kind of do before an interview. If it's like a newspaper you're applying for, kind of read up in the style of writing they have. Explain why you can bring something new to the table, something different. Like it's just stuff like that. Like presenting yourself as a additive to what they already do, I think is the way to go. If you just say, you know, if you just go in there and just try and say what you think they want to hear, I don't think that'll work very much. But I think if you go in and present all the attributes you bring to the table, I think you could apply that to any job interview, honestly, but especially with writing, where you can actually see the product that they're putting out and how you can add to it.
Yeah, and then I'll speak a little bit more like on resume stuff. Like find good examples of resume, like find stuff that will stick out, especially like the design of your resume. Like you don't have to make it like this huge fancy thing, but find ways that aren't just like bullet pointing everything. Find, I don't know, a different style, that where you can include work, links to your work, and then if you're applying to different jobs, like find the job description, and if you have experience with that, like say that you do, like in your job. So I, like when I was applying, I had about 10 different versions of my resume just because of multimedia stuff, where one of them may have been like a TV station that I applied to. And because I had TV experience, like my resume was more focused on stuff that I did in TV rather than the Daily Wildcat stuff, even though I may have done more Daily Wildcat stuff, but they want to see what you've done in TV. And then, yeah, Zach hit it right on the head with interviewing style. You're going to get way more no's than you will yeses, but all it takes is one yes. You're going to get turned down by places where you feel overqualified. That happened to me before I got the Bills job, where I was a candidate for, you know, a finalist for two different places. Both got passed up, and they were places that like were below the standard of, you know, the Bills, you know, NFL teams. So it really is just about finding the right fit, and not getting discouraged when a job you think you should get, you don't, because eventually, you know, if you have the right resume, you know, the right stuff that people are looking for in job interviews, you're going to get a spot.
Cool.
Nice. Very cool. Anyone, some people haven't asked questions. Do you guys want to chime in? Well, I had one more question. Alec and Zach, tell me about a favorite story you've worked on recently and why you liked it so much.
You want to go first, Alec?
Yeah, sure, I'll go. One of my favorites was a Tre'Davious White, kind of a feature, but it was more like in the moment. He's a cornerback for the Bills. He's been rehabbing his ACL injury, and he was activated to the 53-man roster a couple, like last month. Hasn't done media with the team just until he's done healthy, but randomly walking off the practice field one day, he decided he wanted to talk. And usually Wednesdays for the Bills, it's with after practice, Josh Allen talks, Von Miller talks, Stephon Diggs talks, and it's all at like the podium in our indoor practice facility. And so I had to be like quick on my toes, because as Josh Allen was doing his press conference, literally Trey White comes off the practice field and was like just kind of standing around, and one reporter started asking him questions, and soon enough, like everybody from the media like ran up and went talk, try to get, you know, portions in the interview. And so there was just one of those things where I had to be quick on my feet, got over there, you know, asked a question to Tre'Davious, you know, went on for about 10-15 minutes, and then got a story up, you know, the same day. So it was just one of my favorites, because heat of the moment, something you can't really plan for, and you still have to in that moment be able to put out a good story as it happens, because people, Bills fans especially, are going to want to know, what's Tre'Davious White saying about when he could be back. So that was probably my favorite, even though it wasn't something I spent hours and hours on or weeks on. It was just one of those things that comes up, and you have to know how to do your job in that moment.
Cool. Nice.
I'm gonna cheat and say 2 because
Okay, good. That's fine.
because I was gonna say I don't I don't have kids, but I imagine it would be hard to pick your favorite kid. So so the first one happened in week 1. There's a Jets player named DJ Reed who he got an interception and he like threw his hands up to the sky. The Jets were getting killed at that moment, and people started making fun of him because it was like he was celebrating over the top for an interception at the end of a game that they got killed in. As it turned out, his dad had passed away. His dad had MS. I think that's right. Yeah, MS, and he found out his dad had passed away the moment before he went out of the tunnel onto the field. Like literally, he got the text. Somebody told him accidentally because his mom didn't want him to know. He got the text. His dad passed. Goes out, has the game of his life. When I found this out, I started making some calls. I was able to track down his mom, his mentor, his high school coach, talked to some people in the locker room. He didn't tell any of his teammates about it. So I was able to pull together this story within like 48 hours. It was a pretty emotional, compelling story about this guy who's been through so much in his life, to the point that it prepared him for the moment where he literally found out his dad died. Like a really, I've experienced loss in my life, and I could barely even like hold a conversation. And this guy just went and like had the game of his life on a football field. So I was really happy the way that story turned out. You never know if you're going to be able to track down these people. And when they answer the phone, and not only do they answer the phone, but they're great interviews like his mom was. That was a special story that I was proud of. And then recently so the Jets coach, Robert Saleh, after a couple of their big wins, including over the Browns and the Steelers, which were both like crazy comebacks for the Jets, he kept hyping up this guy that I never heard of on his staff. That he was listed as their game management coach. His name Dan Shamash. He kept referring to him in press conferences, and that's always my cue when a coach talks about something that intrigues me and that nobody has written about. It catches my ear, and I started looking into this guy. Nobody had really written about him. I asked the Jets if I could talk to him, and they gave him to me. And it was just, his name's Dan Smash. They call him Smash. He literally is in the head coach's ear throughout the game, telling him whether to go for it on 4th down, telling him whether to go for 2, telling him how much time they need to run down the clock to. Every Friday, he educates the entire team on all the rules around the NFL and things to look out for with the officiating crews that week. He has this great story about how he grinded to make it, and how he lived out of his car when he was working for the Browns on his first job. They didn't pay him for the first 2 months. And so he slept in the office. And so I was able to uncover this cool story about this guy behind the scenes, which are my favorite kind of stories that, people that you don't really think about. And he's been a key part of why they've been so good. So that's another one that kind of came together in a way that I didn't expect. And my favorite stories are all the ones, there's some where I put a lot of work in and then not everything works out. Or sometimes it does work out, but my favorite ones are the ones where you kind of stumble on something, and then everything works out from there, and then you're able to produce a story that nobody else did.
Very cool. Thank you.
I have a question.
Yeah.
It's for both of you guys. So do you guys feel like it's important to have experience non-relating to sports? So general news, science, arts, or do you guys feel like if you have enough experience within sports, you'll be fine to get a job like yours?
I wouldn't necessarily say it's important to get experience in that stuff. I don't think it could ever hurt you to have experience in multiple walks of life and multiple areas, especially, as stories come along, you never know how it's going to pay off down the line. But if your goal is to be a sports writer, I think you do need to have experience in sports writing and being around sports writers and being around sports and the environment and how it works behind the scenes and stuff like that. But yeah, I would never deter somebody from learning other areas, because I think that definitely can help you.
Yeah, same answer here. I think never had like a long-term experience in writing news. I mean, I've written news stories for the Daily Wildcat and like here and there for the Daily Star, but I think it's mostly learning like techniques that could help you with sports writing. Like I think there's transferable skills from news writing to sports writing in terms of like more serious issues where, you know, tough realities, but like, players that pass away or family members of players, like how to deal with certain hard news stories that you don't think about that would happen in sports, but you just had, the Virginia football shooting this week. Like if you're a sports writer, like sometimes having a news background of understanding how to write about, victims in a shooting, that could help. But, that'd be, those are extenuating circumstances, but it doesn't hurt.
Sure. You want,
I just have one last question.
Yeah.
Zach. So, for your profile stories or any of your stories, for the Athletic, like, do you talk about like your stories after it to your editor, or do you just publish it right away?
I have an editor. Her name is Allison. And so, we talk about every week, we talk about what I'm working on. And then when I write it, I always turn it into her. She reads it, edits it. And if it's a longer story, they'll have somebody else look at it too. I mean, it's a good question because not every place is like that. Like my last job, we didn't really have editors. If it was a longer story, there would be one editor who would look at stuff. For the most part, I was publishing everything on my own, which is very stressful because you're not going to catch every mistake, especially if you're the one, in the weeds writing a story. You publish. So what would often happen is I would write it, I would go through it again, fix any errors I could find. Then you throw it up, and then I would go back and read it on the website, and I would find all these mistakes, and I'd start freaking out. So having editors is way better than not having editors, I would say.
for sure. Good question. Yeah.
Did you guys have like a friendly bet going for the Jets Bills game a couple weeks ago?
We did not, but
No.
Alex wasn't there, so we weren't able to link up. But I'm going to be in Buffalo in December, so
Yeah, there'll be some wings
yeah,
on the
definitely
table.
some of those Buffalo wings. It's going to be cold as hell, though. I'm not looking forward
Yeah,
to
it
that.
is.
That's funny. All right. Anyone else? Well, thank you, both of you, for doing this. This is excellent. I think it helped some of us a lot to learn about the ins and outs of the NFL and whatnot. So anyway, if any of them have questions, is it all right if they maybe shoot you an email, or I can be the go-between if you want, but
Yeah, you can shoot me an email
okay.
anytime. I can give you my email on Facebook, Mike.
Okay, perfect. All right, sounds good. All right, well, thank you so much. Have a good
Yeah,
rest.
thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks
Thank
for
you,
having me,
guys.
Bye-bye.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Appreciate it, guys. Appreciate it. Have a good one.
Yeah, thanks, Sammy.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, good questions. Sammy's the president, so that's sports. Thank you.
All right, guys. Have a good one.
All right. Take
All right,
care.
later, Sammy.
All right.
See ya.